23 stab wounds. That's what it took to kill the most powerful man in the world, and not one of those blades was held by an enemy. Rome, 44 BC. The city is the center of the known world. 1 million people packed into 7 hills, the air thick with charcoal smoke, roasting meat and ambition. The forum buzzes every morning with lawyers, merchants, and senators, men who believe, genuinely believe, that they are the stewards of the greatest civilization ever built. And for 500 years they had a system to prove it. The Roman Republic. 2 consuls elected every year so no single man could hold power too long. A senate of hundreds, checks and balances layered like armor, specifically designed to prevent what every Roman feared most: a king. And then came Caesar. By the spring of 44 BC, Gaius Julius Caesar had done something no Roman was supposed to do. He hadn't just climbed to the top of the system, he had stepped outside it entirely. He held a title the Republic had never given to any man before: Dictator Perpetuo, Dictator in perpetuity, for life, forever. The Republic wasn't just threatened, it was standing at the edge of a cliff, and 60 angry men had decided to push it, or so they told themselves. To understand why they hated him, you have to understand why everyone else loved him. Caesar spent nearly a decade conquering Gaul, modern-day France, Belgium, parts of Germany. 8 years of brutal campaign. He brought back unimaginable wealth, extended Rome's borders to the Rhine and the English Channel, and along the way wrote his own account of the war so beautifully that school children would study it 2,000 years later. He was a military genius, a brilliant writer, and a politician with an instinct for the crowd that bordered on supernatural. He gave veterans land, he gave the poor grain, he threw games that left the city breathless. He was magnetic, and he knew it. But in 49 BC, he crossed a line, literally. The Rubicon was a small river in northern Italy. Legally, Roman generals were forbidden from crossing it with their armies. It was the boundary between military command and civilian life, a line that kept Rome safe from its own soldiers. When Caesar crossed it in January 49 BC, leading his 13th Legion south, he triggered a civil war. He defeated his rival Pompey, chased him to Egypt, and emerged as the undisputed master of the Roman world. He could have stopped there. He didn't. He started appearing on coins, something only gods and foreign kings did. He sat on a golden throne in the Senate. He appointed his own men to positions that had always been elected. And then, in early 44 BC, he accepted the title that made the Senate's blood run cold: Dictator Perpetuo. This was not a technicality. Every educated Roman knew their history. Dictators were emergency appointments, 6 months maximum, always temporary. Caesar had just told them it was permanent. He had told 5 centuries of Republican tradition that it was finished. The man who moved first was Gaius Cassius Longinus. Cassius was sharp, resentful, and dangerous. He had fought on Pompey's side in the Civil War and had been pardoned by Caesar, a mercy that apparently bred contempt rather than gratitude. Shakespeare later gave him the lean and hungry look, and the description fits. Cassius was not motivated purely by principle. He felt passed over, sidelined, diminished. Caesar had recently given a rival the praetorship Cassius believed was rightfully his. But Cassius was smart enough to know that resentment alone couldn't sell a conspiracy. He needed someone whose name carried moral weight. He needed Marcus Junius Brutus. Brutus is the most complicated figure in this entire story. He was Caesar's close friend, possibly his most trusted ally. There were persistent rumors, whispered in Rome for years, that he was Caesar's illegitimate son, born from Caesar's long affair with his mother Servilia. Caesar had shown Brutus extraordinary favor. He had pardoned him after the Civil War, elevated him to the praetorship, even reportedly said during the Battle of Pharsalus, "Make sure no harm comes to Brutus." Brutus also believed, with genuine and anguished conviction, in the Roman Republic. His ancestor Lucius Junius Brutus had expelled Rome's last king over 4 centuries earlier. The name Brutus was synonymous with liberty. Cassius worked on him for weeks. Anonymous notes appeared at Brutus's door. "Brutus, are you sleeping? You are no true Brutus." The pressure was relentless, and eventually Brutus agreed. His involvement changed everything. Without Brutus, this was a conspiracy of bitter losers and opportunists. With him, it had the appearance of something noble. They called themselves the Liberators. the liberators. There were eventually 60 of them, senators of varying rank and motive, united by one plan and one date. The Ides of March, March 15th, 44 BC. On that morning, Caesar's wife Calpurnia begged him not to go. She had dreamed of his murder. Soothsayers had warned him. A man named Artemidorus even pressed a note directly into Caesar's hand listing the names of the conspirators. Caesar never read it. He arrived at the theater of Pompey. The Senate was meeting there while their usual building was under renovation, and the conspirators closed around him like a tide coming in. A senator named Julius Caesar approached Caesar with a petition to recall his exiled brother. Caesar began to push the petition aside. Caesar grabbed his toga. That was the signal. Peak! The first blade belonged to Casca. He drove it into Caesar's neck. Caesar grabbed his arm. "Casca, you villain, what are you doing?" And then the room erupted. 23 men surged forward. In the chaos, they were stabbing each other. One conspirator, Minucius Basileus, took a blade in the hand from a fellow plotter. Caesar fought. He pulled his toga over his face so he would not be seen falling. He staggered, turned, and then he saw Brutus. Brutus raised the knife. We don't know if Caesar actually said those words. Et tu, Brute? That's Shakespeare, written 16 centuries later. What we know is this: Caesar stopped fighting when he saw Brutus. The ancient historian Suetonius says Caesar pulled his toga over his head and said nothing more. 23 wounds. Only one was immediately fatal, a thrust to the chest, likely the second or third blow that pierced the aorta. Caesar fell, and he fell at the foot of a statue, Pompey's statue, the man he had defeated in civil war, the man he had driven into exile and death. In the end, Caesar's blood pooled at the base of his greatest rival's monument. The conspirators fled into the streets, waving their bloodied blades, shouting, "Liberty! Liberty!" The city fell silent. Resolution and takeaway. The silence didn't last. 3 days later, Mark Antony stood in the Roman Forum at Caesar's funeral and delivered one of the most consequential speeches in human history. He didn't attack the conspirators directly. He read Caesar's will aloud. Caesar had left 75 silver coins to every citizen of Rome. He unfolded Caesar's bloodied, punctured toga and held it up before the crowd. The mob didn't need more. They tore benches apart for firewood. They cremated Caesar in the Forum itself, right there in the heart of the city. Then they grabbed torches and went looking for the men who'd killed him. They found a poet named Cinna, wrong Cinna, not a conspirator, and tore him apart anyway. Within weeks, the liberators had fled Rome. Within 2 years, Brutus and Cassius were dead, defeated at the Battle of Philippi. Both took their own lives rather than face capture. Within 13 years, the Roman Republic, the very thing they had killed Caesar to protect, was officially finished. Octavian, Caesar's adopted heir, became Augustus, Rome's first emperor, in 27 BC. The men who stabbed Caesar 23 times did not save the Republic. They murdered it. Every move they made, the assassination, the flight from Rome, the civil war, accelerated the collapse they swore to prevent. Cassius's jealousy, Brutus's idealism, the whole shaking architecture of their conspiracy, it produced the exact future they had gathered in that chamber to destroy. They didn't kill a tyrant, they created an empire. Here's the question that stays with you long after the togas and the bloodshed fade. Brutus was not a villain. He was, by almost every account, a man of genuine principle who made what he believed was a noble sacrifice. He gave up his closest friendship, his safety, and ultimately his life for an ideal. And he made everything worse. So what do you do with that?